Okay, so just the other day, a guy with the channel name The Skeptical Agnostic released a video titled 10 Questions Christians Cannot Answer. And he admitted this was complete clickbait and seemed to be genuinely engaging, so I was interested, and actually his video highlights a lot of what I've been talking about and coalesces around issues that I'm particularly focused on. So I'm hoping that my answers can reveal how this is, well, it's a core issue of our time. I made a video recently called A Core Issue of Our Time, and I think it ties right into his video. So I'm going to do a 3-part answer. It is what it is. It's long. And the first 2 are going to be on framing issues, because that's the core of the matter, is different ways to approach the questions, the matters at hand, and the different ways we evaluate our questions based on our framing. And so this first video is about the framing in epistemology. And that's because I think epistemology is a core issue of our time, as I detailed in my video of the same title. That also ties in to this note, which is that I am going to just throw out a bunch of titles to past work that I've done. It connects to a lot of things. I'm not going to be able to go through it all in detail in these videos. These are sort of summations and as effective address as I can without being overlong. So I'm assuming people are interested. I'm not high tech. I'm not going to put the little thing in the corner just for you to click. If you're interested in the topic, I'd invite you to look on my channel or search the title and find it. So I'll do a lot of shout outs along the way, but I'm going to stick to addressing his topic in here, and those are just going to be side information for more places to go for more information. So in his questions, there is this core theme of epistemology. And I think this is the most direct answer to his 9th question. We're going to start at the end as we're going by theme, and this leads us in. His 9th question is, why don't Christians propose the same evidence that convinced them to believe? Why don't they use that the same evidence or thoughts to convince other people to believe? And I think the direct answer to that is because epistemological skepticism doesn't lead people to belief. Now, people might hear that and say, aha, case closed. Therefore, he's admitting Christians can't defeat epistemological skepticism. Well, we'll see. But what I am saying is that epistemological skepticism is a enormously effective corrosive tool of skepticism. And if you really dig into epistemological skepticism, no matter where you apply it, most things crumble, if you're honest. So that's the academic side. And then just on the practical side of living, we don't go through our lives as epistemological skeptics. These are questions that come up in certain circumstances when people are trying to get us to deconstruct certain things. So I'll give you an example. My introduction to epistemology was through a professor at a university who spent the entire semester he was teaching us arguing why climate change is not something that we can be certain that we are as concerned about as the media is saying. And his entire approach to this was epistemological questions. So he handed me an epistemological framework, showed me sort of how to apply it, and set me to work on it. And I was like, yeah, he seems to be right. We don't know enough. We don't really know what we're claiming to know. So whether you don't have to agree with that conclusion to see what I'm saying. You can be gung-ho on climate change, and in fact, you could be informed on all of it, and you could make the same argument that's part of what I'm making, which is that epistemological skepticism is a particular tool, but it kind of destroys anything that we look at. So like if you just leave it unbounded, that's not really, unless you're comfortable just saying we don't know anything, then that's where it's going to leave you if you really open up. So how do we bound epistemological skepticism? So, but in answer to the question, why do you not lead with the evidence that affects you? Well, because we don't live our lives as epistemological skeptics. There are many things that convince us to change our lives, to take a new direction, to take interest in something that are not rigorously objective and epistemologically unassailable. And so when Christians are presenting other people with evidence, they're usually aware that there's going to be some level of skepticism, and they are trying to give the person something that fits into that framework. You can't really give someone a subjective experience of your own. That doesn't mean that subjective experiences are not valuable and shouldn't direct your life, but as the skeptical agnostic keeps asking, he's like, well, how do you get the objective proof? Well, people are asking for the objective proof, so we know when we give you a subjective statement, they're going to be like, no, I want something else. So based on how you've defined the framing and how we're reading the situation, we're going to give people what we think is going to be effective in that situation, or as effective as we can manage it. So that's my answer to number 9, and it ties into this overarching concern of epistemological uncertainty, epistemological questioning, and the general skeptic approach. So I'm going to give you an example to illustrate that point a little bit more. Let's say, because the skeptical agnostic states that he's not closed to miracles. Okay, so let's say I experience a just profound, like peak, top of the line, unassailable mystical experience. Like the craziest, most definite, most assured, most overwhelming, redefining one that anyone has ever experienced in all of time. And let's say that happens as I'm walking down the street. To me, I meet God, I know God, I commune with God. All the boxes are checked. It's just so clear. And it lasts for, in my perception, it lasts for, I'm there for like thousands of years. And I come back, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? I'm a person still? Like I'm in this body? What? And then I just continue walking. But I wasn't suspended from other people's views for thousands of years. It was actually momentary. I was just walking, kept walking. No one else saw it. I just had this internal mystical experience. It'd be impossible for someone to come up to me really and say, you didn't have a mystical experience. It's like, okay, no, I did. You can think of me as crazy, but it doesn't matter. But at the same time, if I go up to someone and say, oh my gosh, like I just saw this and it's exactly like this, and here's how the whole world works, and this is the meaning behind everything, they're just going to be like, okay, crazy guy. I'm sure you saw it. Yep. Mm-hmm. Unicorns, rainbows, whatever. Fairies. Say hi to leprechauns for me. It doesn't translate. I mean, unless you're already the kind of person who believes in that sort of stuff, you're not going to accept it. And I would say, frankly, if you're a wise person who believes that stuff, you would still be skeptical, because there are plenty of people who are misled by spiritual experience, and you need discernment and skepticism to interact with miraculous and spiritual mystical experiences. I have a video titled Spiritual Experience Does Not Make You Infallible, or Spiritual Experience Does Not Impart Infallibility, something like that. So that's the frame of it. I'm not going to walk up to someone and say and just gush my mystical experience at them. I'm going to walk up to them and hopefully, I have a reason to do so, and so I know them, and so there's some sort of pre-established understanding, and so I'm going to take a certain tact that I think will be effective and relevant for them. So that's all question 9. Why don't we present evidence in the same way that atheists are presenting evidence? Well, because atheists presenting evidence are following skeptical epistemology, which leads them to doubt. And of course it does. We are not going to use only subjective statements because we know that doesn't work. Now, epistemology is the root of all this. And it's really an issue. I've been looking into it more because I'm rewriting my first book, which was my journey through epistemology, which was the book that made me a theist and opened the door to Christianity for me. So going through epistemological skepticism actually led me to religion, which is not the case for most people. So, but this is something that has been immensely important for centuries. So Descartes defines this in the philosophical realm. He brings up the skeptical hypothesis. He brings up the objections to common knowledge. And in his book, A Short History of Modern Philosophy, Roger Scruton talks about how preceding Descartes, there was the scholastics, which were sort of the definition of the intelligentsia at that time. And for them, the core issues were the metaphysical doctrines. And epistemology came up underneath that. That was a subsidiary issue. And then with Descartes, there was this shift where epistemology became the prime issue. How do we know what we know? How do we even know any of this metaphysical stuff that we were taking for granted before and not applying epistemology to? And that has essentially stayed put and just corroded since, and it's certainly corroded through all the metaphysical certainties that we had before, or metaphysical hypotheses and assumptions, whatever you want to call them. And then anything that it has been put up against, essentially it has corroded away. So Descartes framed the question, he brought up the skeptical ideas, and he failed to answer them, and nobody has really answered them since. So we are left in this position where epistemology has this prime value, and it's always the question we go to, and many people know how powerful it is, and they can use it to sort of deconstruct a lot of things. You have to be really careful about the limits that you put on it, but it's not really clear how to do that. Like, why should it be limited in certain places? So it's a big difficulty. And the reason why I'm making these videos, the reason why I'm approaching this the way I am, the reason why I'm responding is because this is what led, as I said, this is what led me to religion, to faith, and that's just backwards for most people. And I think I'm the only one that I've ever met who's gone through this particular line of thought, and yet I think it's a core issue of our time. So here I'll give you the summation of my journey, with the knowledge that, just summing it up is not adequate to prolonged argument that I've done in my book. But I would say the quest for certainty. What do we know for certain? What can we be skeptical of? Everything except where's our bedrock of certainty? And the answer that I think you can come to, I think the only thing that really stands up to all skeptical inquiry whatsoever is that existence exists. Absolute, nothing else, unpredicated, not modified, just pure existence. The existence of pure existence. And this isn't about objective proof. This isn't about I can know that existence exists. No, it's about the existence of existence in itself. And so, and this is important because Descartes said, I think therefore I am. He's tried to found certainty on the self. Well, through Buddhism and a lot of modern neuropsychology stuff goes in this direction, there's a lot of reasons to doubt the self. There's a lot of questions you can bring up about the self. So the self is not an undoubtable entity. But existence is undoubtable, I would say. I think that's, we can get into it, but I think that's unquestionable. So by questioning it, you are existing and therefore proving that existence exists. Say it that way. So that actually answers question 1 from the skeptical agnostic. What would falsify your belief in God? Well, God is the being whose essence is existence. God is the foundation of all being. He is infinite being. He is pure being, whatever you want to say. All those definitions overlap. The existence itself is God. Now, I'm not saying that proves Jesus. I'm not saying that that's a sufficient argument for a skeptical agnostic to just be like, oh, yes, he's done it. I'm just giving you the brief highlights. So existence exists, that's certain. Self-existent existence is God. So what would falsify my belief in God? Well, non-existence. But non-existence doesn't exist, so nothing. Nothing would falsify my belief in God. Now, again, that's a theist answer. That's not Christianity. That's not what would falsify, Jesus or whatever else. But that's not the question you asked. So maybe that'll connect to question 10. This also connects to your question 4. Would more people believe in God if he was more apparent? Well, my serious answer to this, I'm not being facetious, I'm saying this with a smile because I know a lot of people will be like, that's not an answer, that's not what he's talking about. Like, I know it's not going to work, which brings me back to question 9. This is why we don't necessarily say the things that work the best for us, because it depends on your mindset, it depends on your framing, it depends on how you're approaching the things. But I'm going to give you an answer anyway. Would more people believe in God if he was more apparent? Well, God is already the most apparent thing. The most apparent thing is existence. Everything you see all the time is existence. So everything you see all the time is God. You can't get more apparent than that. Now, like we don't start there. We don't say, aha, a water bottle. It proves it. Existence exists. God is here. We say, oh, a water bottle. It's made of something. What's the material? What's the coating? What's its function? All that. We skip existence. We skip God because we take it for granted. We assume it because it is the most evident, assumable thing. It is the precursor to all else. Again, I'm not expecting that argument to be immediately revelatory for many people, if any. It's still the answer that I think is true. So, again, question 9, why not lead with it? Well, because it's not as effective as it is for me. It's effective for me because I've walked there, I've figured out things along the way, I've adjusted my view, and I have different understandings, different framing for everything. Therefore, I relate to the question and the answer in a much different way. So obviously that's not going to be the same for everyone. Obviously, I said my position is kind of unique, but this illustrates the whole issue of what I'm talking about, the framing issue of how are you approaching your questions? Why are you asking the questions that you're asking? And why, like, what answers are we supposed to give, right? That affects how, as we talked about, how people approach you, how people try to convert you, because they make assumptions about what you think and what they've gleaned from you and all that. They make assumptions about your frame. You frame the answers by asking the questions. And it's becoming maybe more common, but a lot of people don't frame break. They just accept the frame given to them and try to answer within it. Whereas a lot of times you actually have to break the frame and say, no, I actually don't see things that way. Let's look at it a different way and let's start even further back. So it leads to different questions, different answers, and different evaluations of the question. So in part 3, I'm going to go through my answers to the 10 questions in toto, and we're going to talk about that, about how I evaluate them and why a lot of them don't ring as true, don't ring as effective or disconcerting to me, because my faith is built in a completely different way. But there's more to that. There's other framings in there that I want to talk about. So I'm going to do a part 2 to the framing issue. Thanks for listening. If you got this far, give a like, subscribe, comment, tell me if you see the connection I'm making with the Skeptical Agnostics video. Like, share. Hopefully he sees this video. Thanks a lot.